especially on women's health and factors affecting the fertility. Right. Today we have among us our own colleague Aditi Ratti, who's part of as part of the manufacturing and conglomerates ETU MCAPS. She manages several tracks and enables go-to-market through Microsoft strategic partnership with. Okay, she describes her 6-year-long struggle with unexplained infertility as a life-transforming suffering. Being an artist, she expresses her pain through her paintings. Right. In today's session, the slides which she's going to share is going to be her paintings there in the background. Right. And she has gone through this. She has understood, the pain, and she wants to talk openly about it. In fact, we all know people do not discuss on this matter openly. Right. So she is a person who has created some support network for people to come up and open on this topic. And she is also now working to normalize fertility conversations at workplaces. We have collaborated with her for today's session, which is the Profane Sacred Truth of My Womb, where she shares her own story to create wider acceptance of various kinds of sufferings that infertility brings along. The delayed but happy ending to her story poses some fundamental questions about women's health. Right. Welcome to the session, Aditi, and over to you.
Hey, thanks, Meera. Thanks for laying the context, introducing me. I'm just trying to share my screen, and one of you could let me know if
Sure.
that's
Yes, we are able to see. Yeah.
visible, right? So I'll begin with again, like while Meera has introduced, I'll go into a little detail of why I'm sharing this today, what got me to a point here and elsewhere where I have taken my story um, to create a commune of empathy, right? So this was me, for most part of my life, mostly towing the treaded lines, yet pushing limits often, but still, balancing things that acts well and always in control. Was an all-rounder kid, diligently pursued good education, passionately started building my career, married the love of my life, and then looked forward to having two beautiful children with him. First one before 30, since I truly believed in the biological clock. The day we started trying to conceive, I became frugal about buying sanitary napkins. I was very hopeful I might just stop needing them from any month now. But then came sanitary napkins after napkins for months after months and years after years. And the same painful reminder of my fertility every month became an excruciating reminder of my infertility, this time making more in the heart than down there. I battled infertility for 6 long years that entailed 3 medicated cycles, 3 IUIs, 8 IVFs, 3 terminated, 3 failed and 5 terminated at the embryo transfer, 2 years of painful recurrent drug-resistant infection contracted due to these treatments, an attempt at adoption dropped midway, a bunch of alternate therapies like homeopathy and Ayurvedic and Unani and all that you can think of, major lifestyle changes, clinical depression, and suicidal thoughts. And there was no medical reason known for my infertility, which they also know which is also called unexplained infertility. So to cope with my mental anguish and to accept my own truth better, I started putting my story down through my paintings and my essays and went public with this very intimate and gory chapter of my life. When for the first time I posted this painting of mine on Facebook, 22% of my own Facebook friends, and at that time I had about 500 odd friends, 22% of them confided in me with similar stories about their own ordeal or an ordeal of an immediate family member, which I had no idea about despite being friends with them. I was stunned. Many thought I was brave to open up, and while they drew immense strength from my story, they would rather continue to suffer in silence. And that day I realized infertility is statistically growing into a very grave problem in today's world. It affects up to 15% of reproductive age couples worldwide. And according to a WHO estimate, the prevalence of primary infertility in India is between 4 to 17%, which is higher than that 15% worldwide. Since then, it has become my personal mission to use my story to create collective voice, empathy, and awareness about this topic, which continues to be a social taboo. And to also let any wanting parent suffering from infertility know that it's okay to feel the way they feel. I also ran a small incognito P2P support group for a few years, as Mira pointed out. And then we exhausted a lot of medical support for it and had to stop it. And now, ever since the corporates have started to increasingly include infertility, support in their benefits, I've extended my mission to normalize the conversation at workplaces. Utilization of these benefits is also a good signal back to your employer about the support that you really seek. So with this motivation, here I am sharing my story on yet another platform, taking you through my tryst with the myriad painful emotions of those 6 years and my deepest vulnerabilities. To me, sanitary napkins became this reminder of both my fertility and infertility. And so, I couldn't find a better way or better tool to paint my story with it. Just starting with the interplay of hope and denial, right? Like how they interplay with our life in such tough phases. I still don't know which was a stronger emotion in us all those years. Hope that we will certainly have a baby, or denial that we cannot not have a baby despite all that we were doing to have one. To begin with, we never knew getting pregnant could also be a problem or couldn't be frivolously easy thanks to the Bollywood movies or our population of 1.3 billion. Even after the wait got longer and we started taking medical advice, we were hopeful that it would just happen about any time with a medical nudge. My gynecologist was referred us to an infertility specialist, but that did not perturb us. The infertility specialist advises an IUI, which came as a bit of a shock only because I had to inject myself with hormones like daily. And so what happens in an IUI is, they take high quality sperms and inject into the uterus, raised in time for a controlled ovulation. And they give you all those injections and hormones to control that ovulation and time it. When the first IUI failed, I blamed myself for perhaps not taking enough care after the sperm transfer. But then, one after the other, 3 IUIs failed. All our major tests were normal, and yet I hadn't conceived. So my doctor decided he'll control the entire process and outcome better with an IVF. Because in an IVF, they conceive the embryos in vitro, and only top grade embryos are transferred again into the uterus, again in a controlled environment at a controlled time. And again, we were hopeful that the baby was happening with the first IVF itself. And when that IVF failed, we decided to switch to another doctor. We thought the problem wasn't with me, it was something to do with the doctor or the lab. Fortunately, that sense of denial proved correct because we got higher number of eggs, higher quality of embryos, and quantity of embryos with him. With her. She tested and tried every possible approach, IVF after IVF, and we were hopeful every single time, but yet followed 3 failed and 5 terminated IVFs. Before we would finish mourning a failed cycle, we would already be, investigating and planning that what could we do differently in the next one to be successful. It always felt like we were just there, change this much and things would change. We were just a few bits away from decrypting our secret code to conception. When our deep faith in medical science started failing us, we visited astrologers, wore gemstones, did havans, pujas, with those superstitious totkas, visited multiple temples in the country, went to delivery rooms to receive, the shagun or baby dust from newly delivered mothers, and the list is endless. We did anything and everything for that anybody or anyone or everyone suggested with a lot of faith, as long as it would help with the baby. We still had frozen embryos left for one last IVF, and the best IVF specialist in the country gave up and said there was nothing new she could try in my case. She suggested either surrogacy or consulting an astrologer to time the last IVF as my options of conceiving. Conceiving with my own womb had become a mere game of chance. That was the first time we were jolted out of our denial. We felt helpless because we didn't know what next to pin our hopes upon. Our perseverance, our science, faith, superstition, all avenues were exhausted. For the first time, we acknowledged the possibility that we may have to live childless for the rest of our lives without even knowing why. And this every treatment cycle across these 3 IUIs and 8 IVFs, every treatment cycle used to bring with it abnormal amount of anxiety during the 2 weeks wait, which is TWW, or from the embryo transfer until your pregnancy test, which is your urine pregnancy test called the UPT or POS, pee on a stick, or periods, or antiflow. It's funny that most of my friends with kids conceived naturally did not even know what a follicle or a trilaminar lining is, while I discovered an entire lexicon of shorthand terms that existed to annotate fertility, or rather the lack of it. And there were other friends who did not discover their pregnancies until many days after a missed period, while thanks to those different online forums, I knew every possible symptom that any woman could even remotely witness during the process of getting pregnant. So, it's funny when you're trying to conceive, or TTC as they call it, you're assumed to be poo-poo, which means pregnant until proven otherwise during that 2 week wait. You anxiously wait for an embryo to implant anytime from 0 day post the embryo transfer, or called 0 DPT, or from 5 DPO, 5 days post ovulation. And watch out for anything from a tickle to a sharp pain in the uterus, keenly hoping for implantation to cause it. And next few days, you desperately look for an implantation spotting, despite knowing that majority women do not be due to embryo implantation. After many failures, you tend to get a little more involved with an anxiety and look for minor signs of hope, like your cervical mucus or CM or BBT, which is basal body temperature, etc., and start mapping them onto tons of symptoms that are documented online by women who ended up getting a BFP or a big fat positive or a BFN or a big fat negative line on their POAS test by the end of the week. Wait. You desperately make these cryptic switch searches on your phone all day long, 9DP, 5DT symptoms or BFP or BFN, which means you are 9 days post your 5 day embryo transfer. And what symptoms should you expect for a positive or a negative pregnancy test, a pregnancy outcome? And then EPT showed BFP like symptoms, BFP, but now AF like symptoms, etc., etc. Your spouse urges you to just ignore everything and be relaxed, but he does exactly the same while in the loop with his phone. You may have all the symptoms listed with various BFP stories online, like, tiredness, sore throat, metallic taste in the mouth, and sensitivity to smell, but you still go bonkers over them all because you couldn't resist an early pregnancy test. You thought because you thought you were pregnant, and the test did not show even a faint line. And these early pregnancy symptoms are most often not in your head. They're not mind games. They do exist and manifest from heavy doses of progesterone and estrogen being pumped into your body to support a possible implantation. And hence it's rightly called the phantom pregnancy. The global commune of women empathizing with each other on these various online forums with very suggestive ideas like, flower not in bloom or maybe baby 11, ensure that no one loses hope too soon, even when they start feeling crampy, just like that before their periods. Even when that happens, you find those rare BFP stories, and you want to hope that you are also going to have a miracle of that kind. But finally, periods arrive one day, miscarrying and delusioning you out from your phantom pregnancy. Cycles after cycles for 5 long years, this anxiety would just toss my hope beyond reason. Phantom pregnancy was the closest I had ever come to being pregnant by then. And then you can imagine the amount of futility and exhaustion, that all of this would lead into. Every single IVF cycle spanned from 30 to 45 days, depending upon a short protocol or a long protocol. Involved over 60 syringes of hormones and steroids, 10x hormones raging through one's body, other risks due to blood thinners and immunosuppressants, 20 plus ultrasound scans, 10 plus blood draws, and a dreadful 2 week wait until that outcome would be known. Side effects of the hormones and steroids were horrendous. They would give me so much acidity, bloating, and fatigue that it would be very difficult to function through the day and sleep at nights. The constant bombardment of hormones through my body for 5 years left my hair lifeless and scanty, my face pigmented and sheenless, and my body heavier by 15 kgs of stubborn weight that would just not shed no matter what I did. I was stressed, anxious, depressed, and suffered from sleep issues. My stamina reduced drastically, and I started looking and feeling much older to my age. And all of this was being counterproductive to the potential of my infertility treatments. Sorry, is there a question? I'll continue.
No,
So
Aditi. Go
yeah,
ahead.
as if all this was any less to take, I also contracted a recurrent drug-resistant infection as an extremely rare allergy to one of the most common infections, common injections administered during an IUI or an IVF. I had to switch to a 4x more expensive recombinant version of that injection. The painful infection went on to make me miserable for the next 2 years and also stumble my conception plan during that time. Just like the biological clock, the career clock was ticking too with as much futility, if not more. During good phases in career, my passion and ambition for my profession would help me take my mind off all the medical circus in my life. But during slower times, how much ever I wanted to move to better opportunities, I had to forego them so as to not stir my conception plans with demands of a new place. I just ensured my career growth by moving roles within the same company and building upon my existing credibility. Even my husband had to forego lucrative offers of moving abroad thrice only because it would get exorbitant for us to pay for IVF there. The insurance wouldn't cover it. Everything was on hold for a baby. Yet many would point out work-related stress as an issue with my fertility. And you can imagine how badly it would hurt. They would advise me to quit work, not understanding that I needed to work to not only keep my sanity, but also pay for those exorbitant IVF bills. If not for work, I struggled in my own with my own identity, my own eyes beyond that of an infertile woman. But having said, I wouldn't not admit that it was very stressful to balance the needs of treatment with career occasionally. Working through the day despite all the physical discomfort from the hormonal injections or the infection, sneaking out for ultrasound scans for 2-3 hours, and these ultrasound scans would happen like every other day during the stimulations, wading through the Mumbai traffic to and fro, and then queuing at the hospital for your turn, then managing hormone injections daily at the same time. Icebox was my constant accompaniment, and I knew nurses all around my customer offices also. I was in a field role. I would work until odd hours to make up for the lost time and never let deliverables and deadlines slip, and thus would still be among the top performers in my team. I could never ask for support despite the fact that my employer back then was ranked number one great place to work for years, and they genuinely cared for their people. I didn't think that I had a real excuse like the working mothers around me had when, say, their children were sick. I feared losing out. I feared being pitied. I already felt like a personal failure, and I was not ready to feel like a professional failure too. In those 5 years, every weekend was spent visiting some or the other doctor, either for conception or for infection. Every personal or professional plan was timed as per when the scans would happen, when the injections would be needed, when the ovulation could happen, when the implantation would happen, and what if I got pregnant that particular month. I felt trapped in this abysmal and solitary cell where there was no other sense of time or progress in life. I was a numb robot. I only worked and had no time to think and react to my physical pain and emotional needs. And it gradually took a toll on my mental health. There was an extreme sense of futility. We were losing so much without gaining anything in return. So I decided to put an end to this madness, to this drama, and that deadline was my 35th birthday. I thought nothing beyond that. I'll try as much as I could in those years. And with all what you heard, you can imagine, and maybe some of you are experiencing it. Hey, Shahina, you have a question? There's a hand raise, or maybe if people have questions, I can address them at the end. So yeah, I was where I was, right? That with all of this, you can imagine that infertility and the medical circus that it entails have the ability to put marriage and other relations under strain and tire. But unlike countless women, I was really fortunate. See, a child is typically equally important to both mother and father, at least in today's world. And then how does lack of it not affect equally both? Right. But when the wife is the only one breathing in physical pain, a loving husband will never ever express, which is exactly what I think my husband did. He stood by me all along through my physical and emotional pain and all the hormonal disturbances and imbalances. Thanks to him, I learned to value what I have and celebrate small joys of life amidst all the madness. I convinced my husband and we went about all the IUIs without letting my in-laws know while living under the same roof with them. But managing an IVF under wrap wasn't possible. The dark news had to be broken, but it only introduced me to immense support from them, and I couldn't have been more blessed. With our immediate families by our stride, we couldn't care less for the rest of the world poking or judging us. Still, when are you having a little one like so and so? Career can't be more important than baby, etc., etc. Would occasionally very badly hurt, especially after what we were enduring behind the scenes. Still, we were attending baby showers and toddler birthdays, one after the others, chin up and being happy for our friends and cousins. But I would admit, when treatment started exhausting us, there were occasions when it was very difficult to not feel jealous. Sometimes I used to wonder if I needed a baby badly only because everyone else was having one, or with time too. You know, I used to feel ashamed later about it, but I think it was a perfectly human reaction. With time, I outgrew grew my social shame around my infertility, but that killed my appetite for sitting through motherhood conversations like toilet trainings and school admissions that all my friends had in common but were meaningless for me. I would just explain to myself that it was only a matter of time that their kids would grow up and my friends would start making sense. We would start making sense to each other once again. We also considered adoption. We did a lot of soul searching, and finally, the love triumph for a kid triumphed, and we arrived at our readiness as a couple. We went about the lengthy Kara paperwork, but then when the day came, we snapped out of the process in a weak emotional moment. And I maybe share the link to my blog, and you can read the story in detail. In June 2017, when the best of the doctors gave up on us after countless medical interventions for 5 long years, we had 3 more frozen embryos left that we had to use for one last IVF, knowing that we would fail yet again. You know, it was it was time to choose between our test tube babies and our sanity. While the choice should have been simple, the heart developed a mind of its own. I felt angry and helpless. Before I gave up, I needed my closure. I needed the answer to my why I couldn't be pregnant despite everything that we did in our mind. I started digging deeper into global researches in the areas of unexplained infertility and recurrent miscarriages, processing stats after stats of clinical trials. It opened doors for me to a whole new world of epigenetics. In one line, epigenetics is the science of how your body and your environment influence your genes and influence your genes to express in a certain way, which explains the increased incidences of, say, cancer or infertility in today's world. I also understood that the conception did not depend upon ovaries and uterus and certain hormones alone, but also on a variety of, minor subclinical factors that could be compounding to reduce the overall probability of conception, which is anyways no more than 20% in any given month. These subclinical minor factors won't even show up on any of your health reports usually, and you will keep wondering that why when everything seems so perfect. Examples of such minor factors are, say, gut or kidney or mental health or some subclinical issues with any of your endocrine glands, or unimaginably, even our environment compromised with processed food, endocrine disrupting chemicals, parabens, phthalates, metal toxicity, plasticides, cosmetics, and all the plastics. So if you attended Dr. Firuza Parekh's session in this 2-part series last week, then this is what she was alluding to in the last 5 to 7 minutes of her session. But back in 2017, no doctor in India spoke about this. So after 5 years of medical circus, for my quest for my closure, I put myself through another year of mad pursuit of investigating the minor factors that could be responsible for my infertility. To start with, I found such holistic practitioners in US and Australia and started discussing with them, but soon realized that any investigation or even treatment abroad was unaffordable. So I researched each of those factors that could be, the possible minor factors that could affect fertility that were in the researches, and started approaching individual specialists like immunologists, hematologists, endocrinologists, and you name the specialization. Only a few follow these researchers, but they too refused to consult since none of it was FDA approved in practice yet. None of them were gynecologists and they did not want to work together with the gynecologists. I approached 2 research institutes in the country if they could enroll me in any relevant clinical studies, but there were none going on. I was lost and helpless without any medical guidance. I didn't know how to investigate myself. So the engineer inside me took over and started an algorithmic debugging. I had no help. I got myself tested for various parameters. Some medical friends helped me write some prescriptions for some of those tests, correlated the test results with the research, and finally deduced that I may have certain immunological conditions due to inflammations in the blood causing my immunity to annihilate my own embryos. Something not unheard of. But and for that reason, they were already giving me immunosuppressants in the IVS, but I realized that this kind of inflammation, it wasn't sufficient. I found out all natural ways and lifestyle changes that could help and implemented them all despite being very drastic. I immediately started a strict diet free of gluten, dairy, soy, caffeine, and alcohol. My food reduced to its medicinal value, and I ate nearly the same food every single day. I would make atrocious tasting liver and gut cleansing portions and drink them daily. Switch completely to organic food. Replace a lot of chemicals in day-to-day life like plastics and cleaning agents with entirely natural substitutes. Stop going to salons and using lipsticks, nail paints, or cosmetics whatsoever. Self-treated myself with OTC supplements like antioxidants and coenzymes. Started doing special workouts and meditations to strengthen my natural fertility, and the list is endless. Obstinance with this regimented lifestyle turned my life upside down even more than before. This went on and on, but nearly 4 months into it, I didn't know what was happening. What next? I was again lost, angry, helpless, depressed, and felt trapped in this open cage. I didn't know what next. Having come that far, I couldn't give up, and I couldn't move forward without any guidance. There would be constant altercating noises in my head, and explaining to myself had gone beyond reason and logic. I tried to seek psychological and spiritual guidance, but nothing helped. I was not even sharing my complete mental state with my husband, and I was suicidal. But amidst all the chaos of the last mile effort, two tragedies stirred our lives even further. We had two deaths in the family in April and July of 2018, flanking my brother's wedding in June. Right, so April to June, July, I had like no time to think. And immediately after the following months, I was to be on important longish and success and stressful business trips. Life was all over the place. We understood that life owed us no closures, and we just wanted to close that chapter, right? But it was also important that we used up all our embryos, our test tube babies, so as to not have any what ifs later in life. So we decided to continue this last mile regime only until our last IVF schedule that we scheduled for the end of the year. For once in 6+ years, we wanted to give up, but this chapter of life was still not closing on us. Perhaps because life had other plans, and this time someone up there was to get two sixes for us. Soon after, in August 2018, while on an extensive travel for work, what seemed like a stomach upset turned out to be the biggest surprises from life ever. I discovered that I was 7 weeks pregnant. Yes, a year after the best of the doctors in India gave up on me, I had naturally and spontaneously conceived amidst immense emotional and work stress, not even remembering the last day of my periods. And 9 months later, in March 2019, I delivered a full-term, healthy, and handsome baby boy. And such is destiny. Arjun just turned 4 years last week, and he's the child I bore in my mind and heart even before I could bear him in my womb. If I were to look back and summarize learnings from those years for all the wanting and struggling parents here, then the first one would be decide for yourself. You want a baby, or you don't care as much for a baby. You want to put yourself through this medical abuse or stretch it indiscriminately like I did. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that. Or you don't want to ruin your body with it. It's your call entirely. There's no right or wrong decision. And also remember that every body is different. You may or may not experience the kind of side effects I did. Maybe I was just more sensitive. My body was more sensitive. Also, don't compare yourself with somebody who drank and smoked and yet got pregnant very easily, because that is epigenetics at play. If you decide to take on the medical route, do remember that IVF is not a silver bullet. Even the best of the doctors will usually need more than one cycle to tune the treatment to your body, depending upon the severity of your case. So insist that your doctor goes deeper with root cause analysis of your case and not just try what works for everyone else, right? They should go deeper. Also remember that the microbiological expertise of the doctor's lab is as important as the doctor's experience. And experience is very important. The doctor might be a good person, but these expertise are important. And as we heard Dr. Firza Parekh and in the previous session and learned through my story too, in the meanwhile, support the treatments with your natural health. Go as natural and inflammations and chemical free as possible. Exercise, watch your weight, watch your body fat percentage, get good sleep, etc., etc. If nothing, it will help negate the side effects of the treatments on your body. Irrespective of whether anyone acknowledges or talks about it or not, this journey is tough. Irrespective of the length of the journey, it's tough. with its social, financial, professional, psychological, physiological, hormonal, relational, and all kinds of stresses that come with it. It's perfectly okay to feel every kind of emotion as you battle these stresses. Give those emotions acknowledgement and allowance they deserve, and especially since you know that you're not alone and there are a million others going through this. A sound mental health is important for success of your treatments and for your own sanity. And you can't battle these stresses alone. And these emotions alone. If it takes a village to raise a child, you at least need your spouse by your side. Irrespective of male or female factor infertility, this journey belongs to you both together as a team. And so please support your spouse. But don't lose hope, even if you are like a single mother, single woman trying to conceive with cryopreserved eggs. So with the growing statistics, you will be surprised if you asked for help and consideration from a larger family or social coterie or workplace and didn't get it. So do not assume and suffer in silence. Avail any and all perks that your workplace offers in this direction. And remember, if you embrace it for yourself, you are inspiring someone somewhere else to derive strength from you to embrace it for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi.
Hey, was my
Okay.
screen visible?
Yes, yes, it was. It
Okay.
was.
It's still saying
Uh,
not share. Okay.
no, no, no. So, in fact, I'm
Okay.
speechless.
Yeah,
Aditi, I'm really, I started crying when you were talking about it. It was
I think
really very touching. Yeah,
everyone, yes, everyone, yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, any questions for Aditi?